Hello, everyone. This is Steve Marinucci, freelance writer at Billboard, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Goldmine, Access, and wherever else I can get my stuff printed. Welcoming you to another edition of Things We Said Today, our weekly talk fest about the Beatles, past, present, and to come. Let me first introduce my two cohorts in crime up in the state of Maine, where I assume it's white because of the snow on the ground. Our musicologist and man who knows all about classical music and any kind of music, the great former editor of the Beatles desk at the New York Times, Mr. Alan Kozin. Hello, Alan.
Hey, Steve. Hello, everyone.
Alan is the author of The Beatles from the Cavern to the Rooftop and Got That Something, How the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything, to get in the plug. In the state of Connecticut, the host of the Beatles radio show, Every Little Thing, Mr. Ken Michaels. Hello, Ken.
Hey, Steve. Hi, everybody.
And we have some interesting guests this week. I'm going to do it a little differently and introduce them early on, because you guys are welcome to chime in anytime. First, the former publisher of Good Day Sunshine and a current festival and tour producer you all know, and an all-around good guy. I mean, I don't even have to introduce him, but I will. The great Charles Rosenay. Hello, Charles.
Wow. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate the intro.
And we have a very, very special... This is a reunion, guys. We welcome back to Things We Said Today. Just for today, unfortunately, the executive editor of Beatle Fan, the friend of the Fest for Beatle Fans, and an alumnus of Things We Said Today, Mr. Al Sussman. Welcome back, Al.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Yay!
Hi, Al.
I'm applauding both of you guys.
They dragged me back in.
They dragged you back. Yes. Just when you thought you were going to get away, we drag, as Al Pacino said in Godfather 3. Anyway, we're going to run through a couple of quick bites of news, real quick, and then we'll get around to what we're going to talk about today, which is we're going to talk about Beatle fan magazines. And so we'll discuss that in a minute. There is a couple of pieces of news. Let me start with the sad news of the passing of photographer Paul Goresh, who passed away on January 9th. I don't think I have to say too much to anybody listening about who he is. He is the guy that was at the Dakota the night John was killed and took pictures of John and the killer, John signing the guy's album, and he also took some of the other last photographs of John, and he passed away. I believe he had a heart ailment, and he succumbed to that. Our condolences to his family. There was also some news about the death of Tom Petty, that the coroner said it was an accidental overdose, and I know there was a lot of discussion about that, But given the fact that he must have been taking a lot of medications for his, apparently he was in a lot of pain, and that's it was really sad to hear about that. Really sad. Anybody want to comment on either of those two?
Maybe just to say that Paul Goresh, got to be friendly with John and Yoko. Towards the end of John's life, and that they, I believe, used some of his photos as covers for singles.
Yeah, Watching
Right.
the Wheels.
Right.
Supposed to be his photo.
Yeah.
Charles, you said you knew him?
I knew him from meeting at events and also Facebook friends. And, he's a true fan. He kept in touch with everybody and, had no kind of ego that, he was a photographer or had anything, special. Just loved the Beatles and loved John.
Mm-hmm. Al, did you know him?
Only as a Facebook friend, and really had no contact with him at all. No.
Okay. Did he appear at some of your events, Charles?
No, I think he came to some of my events, as a fan, but never as a guest, never as a speaker or as an exhibitor or anything like that. No.
Okay. There's also some possibles. I guess we'll put it that way. The first, while we were gone, while we were out last week, the news. I wrote a story about Yellow Submarine coming back one night on the big screen in the UK, and people have asked if it's going to happen in the U.S. And at the time I wrote the story, there was no indication, but I'm hearing that there is a possibility that it will happen here now. But nothing has been announced, and that's just a possible question mark. So don't take that as a definite. The other thing
they're saying in the UK it's for one day.
Well,
and
yeah,
I certainly hope that it's more than that, and more than that here.
Do any of us have a pipeline to Apple? It should be released in the theaters as a sing-along version, the same way they release like Sound of Music or Grease, with the lyrics on screen and people can sing in the audience. That's what needs to be done.
The UK release didn't say anything like that, Charles. It just said they were doing the movie.
Right.
So I don't know that that's possible. I will look into that, however, with my contacts. But as far as I know, it's just the regular movie. The other thing is there, and this is all, again, very much speculation. There are rumors that Paul will be touring in the UK. So, again, that has not been announced. The speculation is based on the fact that, everybody knows that the album is coming, and he hasn't toured there for a while. So
it's about 4 years.
Right. So, I mean, it makes sense, but we don't know anything for sure. And I don't want to put any hopes for anyone listening in the UK that this is definite. It's not. It's just there is a website that posted a rumor to that effect, and I won't say it's not a fan site. This was something else. So who knows? We will see. So anyway, now we are going to get on to and the one other thing is the announcement of the Concert for George reissue on the 23rd. They're doing a bunch of packages, including a very expensive, I believe it's $350 package, and that's going to have, all sorts of stuff, Blu-rays, DVDs, books, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess they are doing smaller packages. It's about time this thing got reissued. I was surprised to find out that the Blu-ray was out of print, because I had picked one up a couple of years ago just off the top, and I was like, surprise. So I'm glad they're bringing it. This thing should not be going out of print. So anyway.
It's also being released on vinyl,
right,
for the first time, and it's four discs,
right?
The Concert for George. So and the box set is 10 discs, because it's supposed to be 4, vinyl copies plus 2 CDs, 2 CD and DVD, 2 CD and Blu-ray. And I think that's it. So that's
the Blu-ray set is 2 discs. So because of the the theatrical version and the version is shot. So yeah. But anyway, one more thing I'll mention, that we got a bunch of great responses on the Wally Pedrasik show 2 weeks ago. Thank you for all of those. A couple of people said they had not heard about the books and learned about them from the podcast, and that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad we put out a new, a lot of people got re-familiar with the books in that case. I know I spent a lot of time looking at them, both before and after the broadcast again, and they are marvelous. Wally, thank you again for being with us. But today we're going to talk about publication of a different kind. We're going to talk about Beatle fan magazines, and we're going to have 2 of the people that were involved with 2 of the, I should say the 2 most important Beatle fanzines, I think, that there has been. And one is Al Sussman, who is currently the executive editor of Beatle Fan. And I want to say, Bill King, if you're listening, and I know you are, we miss you. We wish you were here.
Right, I'm basically pinch hitting for.
You're pinch hitting for
Bill King, who's
King,
the publisher of Beatle Fan, and who founded it.
Right.
Very close to 40 years ago. We're in our 40th year now.
Wow. And also with us is Charles Rosenay, who also was the founder and first publisher of Good Day Sunshine. How many years ago, Charles?
We started in '81, but we would be remiss if we don't mention the founder and the pioneer and the predecessor, Joe Pope, who used to publish
Absolutely.
Good Day Sunshine.
Right.
Who published Strawberry Fields Forever, and that was the best ever in history, the funniest, groundbreaking, and it was everything that every fanzine wants it to be.
Mm-hmm. No question.
So anyway, so we're going to do a little roundtable here with these guys, and we're going to talk about the history of the fanzines and how they worked and how it was to publish them. And I mean, let me start with each of you. I mean, Charles and Al, what led up to the starting of both of the magazines? And Charles, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. So when I started the fanzine, there was no internet, obviously, and the idea was, how do I keep in touch with all these people who not only are coming to my Beatle conventions, because I was doing conventions in '78, but also would love to come to the conventions, but are in areas beyond where I'm having the conventions. And I thought the best way to network that was through a fan magazine, which I would open up the first page with all the events that I was personally doing. It was sort of my personal letter to all these people who were writing in, and rather than write 600 letters a week, I thought, well, let me get it out in a fanzine. At the time, Strawberry Fields was kind of in hiatus. It was disappearing from the scene. Beatle Fan had started, and Beatle Fan was the encyclopedia. It was the literal one. It was the one that you went to for info. Strawberry Fields was the funny one and the one that had all the quips, and it was also information and articles, but in a way also the Mad Magazine of Beatle fanzines. Yeah. And I tried to be something in between that gave a lot of information, had a lot of articles, had a lot of in-person photos, and also retained some of the humor and my own personality in the magazine. And at the time, most of the magazines, aside from Beatle Fan and Good Day Sunshine, were Xeroxed, homemade, send me, 5 stamps and we'll send you the next 5 issue kind of magazines, 3 pages, 4 pages. And, GDS, Good Day Sunshine, and Beatle Fan were the first that were really, I'd like to think, more professional prozines as opposed to fanzines.
Do you remember how many pages the first one was, Charles?
Well, the first one was a newspaper. We were all set to go to print, and then, a big tragedy happened, and, we lost John. Mm-hmm. So the first issue, sadly, became a tribute edition, and it was a newspaper that you opened up a la Rolling Stone at the time. But thereafter, it became, the 8 by 10 or 8 by 11 that it was. It was professionally offset, and then eventually it became a color cover and a finer quality magazine. And ironically, in its last days, it was taken over by Matt Hurwitz, who really brought it to another level. But at over 120 pages, it became a book. You can't put out a book every other month. And it's just too overwhelming. I mean, people would say, hey, the Beatles aren't around. How do you have enough material to fill a magazine? And I said, I have too much. I don't have enough pages to put in all the stuff that there is.
Right.
So yeah, that's a little bit of where we went with that.
Al, how about you?
Well, as Charles was saying, in the 70s there had been Beatles fanzines. There were things like Barb Fennick's The Right Thing.
Right.
There was the McCartney Observer, the Harrison Alliance, and they were. For the most part, they were, as Charles was saying, they were, mimeographed, and photos were, copy pasted or actually literally pasted back in those days. Now, Bill King is a professional journalist.
Right.
He just recently retired from 42 years with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Right. And
back in the 70s, he was the music and TV beat reporter and rock critic.
Was he really? I didn't know. See, I didn't know that. because that's kind of, that's. I mean, I was the TV guy at the paper I worked at. I didn't know that Bill was doing that. I thought I thought he was on the copy desk. That's what he told me.
For the Atlanta, right?
That was later on.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but back in the 70s, he was on both the TV and music beat, and he had been collecting all these little bits of news because, of course, in those days, that was a very different time. All four Beatles were still alive. There was still the possibility of a reunion. Plus, they were having great success with both singles and albums and tours and all. So there was a lot of information out there, and Bill decided that there should be a more professionally done, more professionally presented form for of a Beatles publication, and as a matter of fact, he talked about this with, in fact, Mark and Carol Lapidus just prior to the Atlanta Beatle Fest in the fall of 1978, and Mark and Carol convinced him that there was definitely a place for such a publication, and so the first issue of Beatle Fan was basically went to press at the end of 1978.
Did Bill? I mean, I know that when I was working at the newspaper, because I had all that, those news sources. I mean, I was watching for Beatles stuff coming through the wires. Was Bill doing the same thing? Was Bill doing?
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah, and that was one of the nice things about working at the paper. You had all. I mean, this was before the internet, and you had all this stuff, that was coming to you. Things like you'd know about TV programs before anybody else. You knew about all sorts of things, but sure. Bill was doing the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the early issues of Beatle Fan, the majority of the material in those first 2 or 3 issues was news.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they were put in hardbound by was it Peer and Press?
By Pierre. It's funny because you on the show with Wally, you were talking about Pierre and Press, and as it later became Popular Culture Inc. Mm-hmm. The first 4 years of Beatle Fan are available I don't know if they're available. They've been out of print, of course, for many years. You might be able to find them on eBay, but at least the first 4 years are there in bound volumes.
Yeah, I have those. I remember buying them way back when. I think I bought them when they came out, so they weren't, But now I think the prices would be a little higher. But the difference in the issues between those beginning years and later is like amazing. I mean, because you can see, Beatle Fan just really came. It just grew and grew and grew and it developed and go ahead.
Charles can address this because, in fact, the first year or two, basically, Bill and Leslie were putting the magazine together on their kitchen table and basically doing paste up of the entire magazine. It's not like now where they do it on a computer. And I'm sure Charles had the same experience, right?
Yeah, no computer at all. I would get in an article, I would type it up, I would position a photo, I'd lay out the pages. It took 2 months to put out an issue, and then it would take another week to mail it out. It was my parents, myself, and whatever friends I could talk into coming over and doing it, and literally thousands of issues were being poured out of my kitchen. You're exactly right. And then we took 2 days off, and it was back to the issue again. It was really unbelievable. Yeah. The hardest and most time-consuming and exhaustive thing I'd ever done. We loved, you were mentioning getting news sources about TV programs and all that. I love getting media stuff because I cheated. I printed the exact capital press release that I would get. I wouldn't rewrite it. I wouldn't put it into an article. I would print it exactly how we received it with all the information. So that was a plus because people were seeing things that only, Alan Kozin and only, editors at newspapers were getting, and they were changing it into articles. I was just printing them as is, so for me it would take up 2, 3, 4 pages, but was also giving the readers, wow, this is direct from the horse's mouth kind of thing.
Exactly.
And those press releases today, some of them are like history. I mean, they really are. Alan, let me go to you. You take over.
Yeah. When Bill started, I mean, it really was, a completely different kind of magazine than it is today. And but I think
by the way, we probably should add that Alan has been part of the Beatle fan family for. When was your first piece in the magazine?
It was the early '80s.
Okay.
I subscribed to it, and I was reading it, and it's only completely by accident that I started writing for it. Actually, it was because I was a jerk. Not usually the best, job recommendation, but, I had written Bill a letter. I'd written Bill a letter that is, now really sort of embarrassing, but for some reason, I just had gotten annoyed by, the density of the layout, and a number of other things. Maybe there were some articles that I thought might, could have been better researched or whatever. So I wrote Bill a letter just sort of saying a lot of this stuff, including that really the only thing I remember, because it was so stupid, was I complained that there wasn't enough white space. That, because they were putting it together the way they were, it was like the copy, the text was end to end. And Bill wrote back a suitably sort of angry response, pointing out that most of the readers didn't really want to read white space. And, he had a point. And but also the thing is, I think he began by saying, you clearly don't understand the realities of fanzine publishing. And he was right. I didn't understand the realities of fanzine publishing. And I knew that I wasn't subscribing to Time magazine. But, I guess I hadn't really taken into account the difficulties that, Bill and Charles and Barb Fennick and everybody who was doing them in those days were facing. And I felt actually so bad about my initial letter that fairly soon after that, I think the first Beatles CDs turned up, which were the Black Triangle, as it's now called, Japanese Abbey Road, and there was a Japanese Tug of War. And so I thought, okay, I'll review those for Bill. So I sent them to Bill, and he printed them, and then I just kept sending stuff. And then when I interviewed one of them or someone in their circle for the Times, I would typically send Bill a QA of the whole interview. So in a way, Beatle Fan was getting better stuff than my own paper was, because they weren't interested in the whole interview. They were interested in a 1,000-word piece with some quotes in it. But so, it got to the point where when I was going to do these interviews, I was thinking of both of the places I was writing for, different as they were. And keeping Bill in mind and what a Beatle fan reader might want to, hear these guys say. So, yeah, I'm just sort of curious about, both of your memories of, apart from getting the press releases and printing the press releases as they were, which is actually kind of an interesting thing to do. And I know that fanzine readers, loved seeing that kind of stuff. Like, how else did you get people to contribute?
So for me, Al, I had the great advantage of having a lot of friends who were attending my conventions. And, in the early days, it was the Tom Frangiones, David Schwartz, a lot of really good guys who wanted it. They wanted to be print. They wanted to see their name in print, and they were great writers. Bill Last, Ken also and Joanne. Mike Street, a lot of people, who we all know the names. And it was an opportunity for them to see their name in print, get great articles out there. And I would pretty much anything that came in, if it was half decent, I would print it. The pleasure of it was when I finally got to meet McCartney for a longer time. I gave him a bunch of issues of Good Day Sunshine. I gave him a copy of a book that David Schwartz wrote, some of my editors. And he signed autographs to all of them. And that was my, payoff after all those years of them contributing and not getting paid, obviously. Good Day Sunshine was never a moneymaker. It never had enough ads and never had enough, even when it had 5,000 subscribers, the cost of printing was always more than it was worth. But I always justified because I was producing the conventions and because in '83 I was starting doing the tours. So I saw it as a big picture. It was the Beatle network, the Beatle business. And, if Good Day Sunshine was a loser, but it was contributing to the tours, it made sense. I mean, and it's, now the tours get 20, 30, 40 people. When GDS was at its peak, it was getting over 100 people. So it made sense for me to do, even though, again, the longest hours, the most ridiculous amount of work. I can't imagine what I could have done with all that time. But when you got that final issue in your hand and the cover looked great and the articles, and you got the smell of that print, it was all worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, didn't Linda say to you that we read Good Day Sunshine all the time?
Yeah, Linda, she was always amazing. She would always say, "Oh, Connecticut, I'm Scarsdale. I remember you." She said, "Yeah, we get that all the time, and Paul and I look it over to see if things are right in it and all that." That was always nice. When we had our 10th anniversary, because Joe Pope used to put out flexi discs, I put out cassettes, and every year we did a cassette. But for our 10th anniversary, we did a CD, if I'm not mistaken. And Paul and all the members of his band and down the line, Alan Williams, Tony Sheridan, Richie Havens, those people all contributed congratulatory messages. So that was, I'm established. When Paul, sends a message and says congratulations, on your anniversary, hello to all the fan members. That was pretty special to get that. And that was a real highlight. But you had said, I don't know if I answered the question. I think I went on a bit of a tangent. But I also, Ken, because you mentioned about Paul and Linda reading the magazine, we sent it to all of them. We sent to Yoko, we sent to George, we sent to Paul, and we also sent to Ringo. When Ringo did his auction a few years back and liquidated a lot of his collection, one of the lots was his issues of Good Day Sunshine. So he obviously got them and obviously kept them, and that was a surprise to us because we had no idea if these guys ever got the magazine. But we always like saying, "Oh yeah, we sent copies to all the guys," which we did. We just never knew until Linda said what she did, until Ringo's auction came, that they actually did get them and they had them in their possession.
It's interesting that they do read them. I've heard about them. Reading Beatle Fan as well. I mean, things get back sometimes, and it's why do you think? Why do you think the fanzine world has largely sort of shriveled up to a degree? I mean, there's Beatle fans still left, and I don't know, is Day Trippin' still around?
No.
It's a website.
Website.
Yeah.
And there's news on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Tom Aguilar.
There's still small ones. Aguilar does Octopus's Garden out of New England.
Right.
There's a handful. It's really fun because back in the day, I don't know if Beatle Fan did this, but we tried to be like friends with everybody. So Beatles Unlimited, the Tokyo Beatles Fan Club, the London one, you mentioned Barb Fenn, all the ones that had fanzines, we would swap. The minute one came out, there would be an automatic subscription list, and people would get everyone else's fanzine. So there was never really competition, which was really awesome. Everybody really had their own little niche, I guess, and everybody respected it. So if someone published a magazine that only put out, 5-page mimeographs once a year, they were still getting 6 issues of GDS, and we were getting theirs. So that was a nice kind of brotherhood or sisterhood out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when Barb discontinued the Right Thing, she gave Beatlefan her subscription list, and also she did some contributed some articles for a short while before she kind of moved away from the Beatle world.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about why, Alan, why the fanzines kind of dropped down. I think the answer would be just like newspapers, the internet.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess maybe, I have to kind of take a little bit of the blame for that, because
it's all your fault, Steve.
It's all
it's all your fault.
You killed the fanzine.
Well, I don't know if I killed them. I hope not. But I think when I started and when the other websites got started, I think that the internet was new and there was some things happening there, and I think that probably had a little bit to do with it. Maybe I don't.
Well, it may, but still, I think fanzines are a little different than newspapers,
right.
in that the audience for fanzines is passionate about what the fanzines are about, and I know it's still. I can read all this stuff on the internet, but it's still kind of nice to get a copy of Beatlefan in the mail,
Right,
yeah.
And the one thing that Beatlefan has always done, and the one thing that the Good Day Sunshine did, and some of the others, is they went into a little more depth, I think, than a lot of the internet. There was some depth on some of the internet stories, but Beatlefan was a lot deeper into that. I guess the word would be geeky, kinda, but that's kind of what they. That's kind of what they did. They got more scholarly. You had people like Alan, for example, writing for Beatlefan on a regular basis. You had a lot of people. That's what you had. And I think there's the difference there. So.
Well, plus, we have now basically a whole roster of very well known contributors. People we inherited Tom Frangione from Charles. We have Bruce Spicer. We have Jeff Slate. We have Kid O'Toole, who's been writing for Beatlefan for going on a quarter of a century, even though she's one of the younger contributors. And Wally, of course, has been writing for Beatlefan since nearly the beginning, and so we have basically a real kind of murderer's row of Beatles. I don't want to say scholars, but
hardcore. That's right. That's accurate. Scholars.
I think scholars is a good word. Sure.
Okay.
You not only had contributors, you had correspondents. You had people that you could reach out to in different parts of the world. If you wanted news of something that was reported in Japan, I think Bill didn't he have his own correspondent in Japan?
Oh, yes.
And Charles, too.
And that's how I got started with Beatlefan, because in I guess maybe the third or fourth issue, Bill was asking for a New York correspondent. And so I had become a subscriber, and so I volunteered. And basically, and this gives you an idea of how long ago 1979 was, basically being the New York correspondent amounted to basically cutting clippings from the New York newspapers, putting them in a manila envelope, and sending them down to Decatur, Georgia, where Bill and Leslie published the magazine, and in fact, I guess it was the last issue of the first year, the New York Post headline, "The Beatles are back," which was this very premature rumor about The Beatles had been asked by Kurt Waldheim, who was the Secretary General of the UN, to reunite for a concert for the boat people, if I recall, from Cambodia.
I think that's right.
I may not have the details correct, but it was like a front page headline, and so I sent that down to Bill, and it ended up on the front page of the magazine. And of course, the big test, of course, came in December of 1980. But again, that's how I got involved with the magazine. But yeah, people like Peter Palmieri, who's been Beatle fans' West Coast correspondent for years and years, and we have a Japanese correspondent and a Latin American correspondent. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. And Charles certainly had the same with Good Day Sunshine.
Did you use email in those early days, Al? Or was it? Did you use email, or was it? Or did you have to send?
No, we didn't start doing email. I didn't start emailing articles until probably maybe the 90s, maybe the late 90s. More likely, though, probably the early 2000s.
Oh, I would think I would think it'd be earlier than that. I mean,
well, Bill's old school.
Okay.
And so it took him a while to kind of get him into the technology. So it was we probably didn't begin emailing articles until, like I said, probably within the last 20 years.
Did you do snail mail before that?
Oh yeah. Everything had been snail mail before that.
Okay. Ken?
Well, I have a question, but first I just want to make a comment, and that is that when I first started out in radio doing Beatles shows, first on college radio, and then during my 10 years on WDHA, as Al well remembers, a big part of my show was having news every single week.
Yeah.
And I looked for Beatle Fan and Good Day Sunshine and Beatles Monthly magazine and all the other smaller magazines. I don't think we mentioned Instant Karma, which was basically a John and Yoko fanzine, but they also included news on the other Beatles too.
Yeah.
There was one called Fab that Don Jeffers, who lived in the New York area, started. That was a very small fanzine. But I collected all these fanzines in part because I was hungry for news every single week. And Beatles Monthly lasted a month, and I needed to stretch the news out. So all these other fanzines were such a tremendous help, and you never knew how in one fanzine there might be some piece of information that was in there that wasn't in the other fanzines. So and when you said, Charles, what you did about all the work that you were doing, that it really was a labor of love. Neither you nor Bill King or any of these the smaller fanzines ever made a living from this. And, this was all what you could do in your spare time. And you all deserve to be so commended for it because, like we said, this is all pre-internet. You had to do it the old-fashioned way. And gathering all this information was just so extraordinary. It's so much work to do, and I think most people aren't aware of all the work that was put into it. But when I look back at Good Day Sunshine as well as Beatle Fan continuing now, you had not only the news, but you also had reviews of the newest releases. You had historical perspectives. You look back at certain anniversaries. You also had personal stories, personal contact with the Beatles, which you had quite a lot of, Charles, in Good Day Sunshine.
Yeah.
And also a lot of, things for the collector, which may be, very much on the geeky side for a lot of people. But like we mentioned, Matt Hurwitz, he was always good at coming up with all these different versions of different Beatle albums from around the world with different serial numbers and what was inscribed on the albums and so many variances. And I'm, wondering, between Beatle Fan and Good Day Sunshine, did you think about who your audience would be? Was there anything that was off the table that you wouldn't consider at all? Or was anything up for grabs? Really?
So with Good Day Sunshine, I wanted to be, what would appeal to me. I wanted it to, give a lot of news, a lot of reviews, a lot of things that you couldn't read anywhere, but with a personality, with a laugh, with a smile. And, I don't know if anything was off the table, but I do remember Alan Williams getting mad at me because I reported that he got drunk and was arrested. And I can't remember if what I called him the something that gave the Beatles away. How could he manage when he can't manage his own life? And he really came down on me for that, because I just never thought he'd get it, but he did. And that's about the only, I think, thing I shouldn't have done in all those years, and I felt really bad because we were friends, and we were friends even up until he passed. But it hurt his feelings, and that's the only thing I look back on. If I could have retracted that and perhaps letting Matt Hurwitz take over. Aside from those two things, I guess I don't have very many regrets, and there wasn't a lot that was off the table. I was kidding about Matt Hurwitz. If he's listening, Matt, you did amazing things with the magazine. I wish you could have sustained it, because that was at a point where my parents were getting on in age, and I was starting to have too many. I could never have kept GDS at that level for much longer.
Yeah, it is really a shame. As Alan was saying, it's nice to have a hard copy, to have everything right in front of you that you can hold, instead of always reading something off the computer or off your cell phone. Mm-hmm. So, Al, how about you?
Well, I think I don't think there was anything that was, that was off the table. Although what we did do in the early years, we did a fair amount of, encounter type pieces, of people who, people who had met a Beatle, right, or met the whole group, and we kind of de-emphasized those pieces fairly early on, and especially since we knew that Charles was doing a lot of that sort of thing, because we kind of figured that Charles would do a better job with that kind of material, and the other thing was that what I think set Beatle Fan apart from really all of the other Beatles publications was the fact that we were objective, that we were, we tried to be as even-handed as possible, and so we basically told it the way it was. Well, if we didn't like a particular album, we said so. And we try, especially since not so much Good Day Sunshine, but and not even good, Strawberry Fields Forever, but some of the other Beatles fanzines had been so completely one-sided, basically putting them up on a pedestal, and they could do nothing wrong, and we basically took the attitude that they were, yes, they're the Beatles, but also they were human beings, and especially with their solo work, they might not have put out the greatest of material in certain cases. So we tried to be more objective than the earlier fanzines. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I had, I agree with what Al's saying, where it was, they reported news, and I think GDS was going towards more of a, encounters. And also, we had a really good pipeline to Liverpool, because I was going to England so often that we got a lot of stuff from Bill Harry, and I got a lot of stuff, from that end of the world. Which not that it was an exclusive, but it was maybe more personal, and because if in fact Beatle Fan intentionally backed off on doing that because Good Day Sunshine was more that way, well then I can officially announce that because Beatle Fan was doing such a good job with the news, I was making up half the stuff, so that's good. I was just making up things.
Anything for a scoop.
Absolutely.
I think the fact that Beatle Fan took the view that we don't have to simply as a matter of course praise everything that they do and everything that comes out. I think really made a difference for me as a reader, first of all, but also as a contributor, because it seemed like a real magazine rather than a propaganda tool, an unpaid propaganda tool of Apple, It definitely wasn't that, so I think that was a good thing. I mean, as some of the others did too occasionally. I seem to remember Barb Fennick being fairly critical of Apple at the time they were suing Beatlemania show. And some other things too. So, yeah. I
remember even during the 76 tour, I recall she was somewhat critical of the McCartney organization, especially the security people.
But that was a difficult decision to try and be objective, because a lot of fans, even now, I know we've there's been issues on this show where we've been critical, and we've heard from fans who don't appreciate that, and I would suspect that back then it was probably worse. Because,
believe me, one of the first pieces that I did for Beatle Fan was a report card, and Charles knows, was a report card on the first decade of the solo careers. And I went at it from an objective point of view. So I gave, particularly I gave, kind of ironically, I gave John an incomplete, and this is in the spring of 1980. So, that's kind of prophetic. But I also gave George, I think, a C, and overall. And you should have seen the mail. Oh my goodness! It was as if I had committed heresy. In fact, there was one person, especially after I later gave George's Somewhere in England album a bad review. Somebody wrote in saying that I had a vendetta going against George Harrison because I was, I basically was calling it the way I saw it. Maybe I was right. Maybe I wasn't right, but that was the way I saw it. And so at that time, people were not used to that kind of sort of objective reporting, commentary, however you want to put it.
Well, no matter what, you still have to realize that whatever it is you're expressing is still an opinion.
Of course.
Okay. And the fans should look at it that way too.
Right.
Nobody, what they're saying, nothing is the Bible, how we must all look at this music. So,
right. But especially up to that time, most of the fanzines had been, for the most part, pretty uncritical.
Yeah, that's true.
Really,
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Early on, we certainly were. We were certainly there for the, not 16 magazine, but we were certainly there for the people who loved and thought, the guys could do no wrong. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I can remember when we used to do a table at Beatlefest, and people would ask about comparing Beatle Fan and Good Day Sunshine, and I used to say that Beatle Fan was really more like Time or Newsweek, whereas Good Day Sunshine was more like, and this is not by any disrespect, but that it was more like People magazine.
That's fair. I would say that's funny, because I would say Beatle Fan was the New York Times, and that I was the New York Post. I would say that.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah.
Except for your grading column, because I used to love when the New York Post used to do the grading of the Mets and the Yankees, before the season, after the season. So whenever I saw your column on that, Al, I used to, love it because it reminded me of that.
Yeah.
But both fanzines did extraordinary work in their own way. I mean, there's so much work that was done in both fanzines that, how can you not admire the work of both those fanzines?
Sure. Well, I think someone coming up to a Beatle fan table is going to say, what's the difference between you and Good Day Sunshine? Expecting to praise Beatle fan, just as if at my convention, if I had a Good Day Sunshine table, people would come up and praise Good Day Sunshine and say, yeah, we don't get a Beatle fan. It's too it's too starchy or too too upper stiff. But Good Day Sunshine, yeah, you're going to hear that forever. I think the difference.
Sure.
The differences complemented each other, and if somebody was subscribing to one, the likelihood is they were getting the other. And if they were getting both, they were really, they were getting well-rounded Beatle news.
Yeah.
Try to time it so that we were in the alternate months. I don't know if you ever knew that, Al. We tried to time it so our magazine came out whatever month Beatle fan didn't. So if Beatle fan was...
I wasn't aware of that.
We didn't want someone getting the same magazine on both magazines on the same day. They give them time to read one and then jump on the other.
Has there been any thought of making an electronic archive of either magazine? Because it would be really nice to have all that material in searchable form,
Well, you can do it. I have all the issues if you want to do that. Sure.
If I want to scan them myself as a...
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
And Bill has talked about it from time to time, but it's an awful lot of work.
Or even bound volumes. How about that? Since the Beatle fan had the first 2 volumes, and then Period or Pop Culture Inc. went out of business, but
right,
it would be nice to have bound volumes of both of those. I don't know what the market would be for them, but I think they'd be really, really nice to have, in that form, maybe with an index. More work.
I don't know. I have a complete run of Beatle fan from issue number 1, and I have a complete run of GDS from number 1. If anyone wants it, I'm taking offers. No problem. We don't have the exclusive complete run, complete set. No problem.
There must be someone out there who has plenty of time on their hands and is dying to accomplish this. And we'll have them on the show as a guest if they do.
That'll entice them.
Oh, yeah.
Charles, how many issues of GDS did you do?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know. That's a great question. Well over, I don't know, 100 and something?
100 and something? Okay. And how many issues has Bill put out, Al?
Well over 200. The new issue is actually across the room, so I can't really get it right now.
I have it here. It's 229.
Okay.
229. Okay.
Okay. I mean, I mean, even, I was just thinking just highlights, put out a highlights book, kind of like what the Beatles book did a couple of years ago. That would be...
That's still a lot of work, because you still got to go through every single issue.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anytime you do that kind of thing, sure, there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a thought. What was the most memorable issue? Was the you guys, Charles, you mentioned the Lennon issue, the Lennon death issue. Is that the most memorable for you?
No, I would like to forget that, actually. Let's make that the least memorable.
Okay.
Probably the anniversary edition that Paul contributed to, and we got all those, Cynthia and so many great people, contributed audio to that. That's probably the most memorable. So many issues also, I forgot, doubled as program magazines. If I would have a major convention, we'd print up we'd print up an extra 5,000 of them and give them out as the convention program. So there's so many great issues, and when you hit upon doing a volume of getting like the greatest hits of the magazine and putting it out as a book, it's a sore point for me, because at one point I gave a batch of articles and original photos and my actual original layouts to a gentleman, and we'll tell his name was Ed Gross, and he put out a book or two, and he said he was going to put out an issue of GDS, a book, the greatest highlights of. And I never got the materials back. He never published it. It was one of those really, you're talking about 20 years ago, but it left a really bad taste in my mouth. And when people always say, how come you never published a book and never wrote about your experiences meeting Beatles or doing the conventions or anything like that, it's really, that's the reason. That left such a bad taste in my mouth, unfortunately. Sure. And if you publish a fanzine of over 100 pages for that many years, you think, I published 100 books. I don't need to do another one.
Yeah. Al, what's the issue that you remember? I seem to remember when Bill was on with us way back when he mentioned the reunion when he got the scoop on the Beatles session, on the Fab sessions, on the Beatles sessions.
In fact, that actually didn't even appear, at least at first. It didn't appear in the magazine, but it appeared in, I think, the very first Beatle Fan Extra, which is the one-page, sort of news, breaking news, if you want to call it that, edition that we put out usually between each issue, and that the story, the story of the tape that Yoko had given Paul at the Hall of Fame induction, at John's Hall of Fame induction. That was that story and the beginning of the Threedles sessions. That was like the big scoop, and also the issues around the time of the anthology in the right in the in 95 and 96. Those were a lot of fun to do because there was so much to cover, and it was plus it was it was really like a kind of almost like a revival of Beatle fandom at that point. But also, obviously, the first big test was obviously the Lennon commemorative, which was what was supposed to be the second anniversary issue of the magazine, and then basically had to be done over, really from scratch in basically 2 weeks. And then also the George Harrison commemorative issue that we did in the fall of 2001. Which we had a little bit more, lead time, if you want to put it that way, on doing that. But I thought we did a really nice job with that. But there have been a lot of highlights. I mean, Alan may have some other ones of his from in his memory bank.
Let me just interject that. We, like I mentioned, we did have Bill King back when we were doing phone calls instead of using Skype like we are now. It was back Things We Said Today, number 26, when it was just Ken and I, and it's online. It's on the Podbean site, BeatlesExaminer.podbean.com, and just search for Bill King. But it's it's show number 26 if you want to listen to it. Alan, did you want to say anything about an issue there?
Yeah, why don't I just say a couple, just because Al had mentioned that, and it would be odd not to have a response. There were two things. Probably the first time I interviewed McCartney in 1990, that was an interview that had a lot of stuff that just was not going to get into the New York Times about his policy now about releasing multiple versions of singles, all with different B-sides and things like that. And I thought he was very sort of frank in ways that I actually wasn't really prepared for, because you usually read the same answers, but I tried not to ask the same questions to avoid that, and I think it worked. But I think the best thing that I did for Bill probably was around the time of the Beatles anthology, because I went to London to do a piece for the Times and interviewed Neil and I'd interviewed Paul and Ringo. George didn't want to talk about it. And just and Derek and a whole bunch of people, and Mark Lewison about, who told me about finding these, George Martin finding these acetates in cupboards, and the two of them sort of trying to figure out what they actually were, because it wasn't clear when you just find an undated acetate,
What were they?
Well, the Pete Best version of Love Me Do, and because it didn't even say Pete Best on it. I mean, when George Martin brought it to Mark, he wasn't entirely sure what it was and who it was. And, through deduction and listening to the drumming and various things, they pieced it together. The same with the Anti-White Please Please Me.
Okay.
So things like that, and I interviewed George Martin for that, and Jeff Emmerich, and I sent the QAs of all of those straight to Bill, and so I thought that gave Bill plenty to work with for the anthology that I doubt another Beatles fan magazine would have had.
Okay,
that's amazing that you got to interview all those people all at once.
Yeah,
it was a fun trip.
I bet it was. Did you hit any record stores while you were there?
Probably, but yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I do remember, even though George didn't want to talk, I went to a meeting where they were basically storyboarding the Free as a Bird promo, and George was in that meeting, so we, just sort of said hello. That was it. It wasn't an interview, but even that was just fun. It was a great trip.
And now that brings up, they were storyboarding the Free as a Bird video?
Yeah, they were explaining what they were going to do, and they had that Steve Wright book of, all the songs and what they were about, and because they were...
Oh, my.
Yeah, and so they were just putting together what they were going to do, and it was great to hear about that in advance. I mean, they weren't really showing anything, and definitely not playing the song with me in the room. For some reason, I could not persuade them. No, you have to wait like everybody else.
That's. I mean, they didn't start actually saying the images they were going to use. They were just talking about the concepts. Is that right? Right. Okay.
And if they played me the track, I would have had to call Bill and sing it to him. And so, for Bill's sake, it's good because there were times when I would get an early promo of something, like I can remember, for instance, My Brave Face and Flying to My Home. Mm-hmm. And I remember calling Bill and playing it to him over the phone, and we have subsequently referred to that as the phone mix, But yeah. So
wow.
Sorry, Bill, that I was such a jerk at the very start, but we've had a great time since then.
And I remember, I remember one thing involving you, Alan, when we were on, I guess it was when we were still on Prodigy, or the Prodigy group, when you revealed to us the name of Paul's new album was going to be Flaming Pie. Remember that?
I don't remember it, no.
I do, because you told us that before anybody else knew it. You said that's the name of the album, and it turned out it was. So anyway, I think we've about run out of time, and God, this went by so quickly. I wish we could do 2 hours. We probably could have filled it easily.
Can I have 30 seconds?
You can have 30 seconds, Charles. Go.
So we started by, tipping our hat to Joe Pope, who was, a pioneer in not only the fanzine, but also, the first one to do Beatle conventions, of course, in Boston. We also want to, remember Joel Glazer, who passed away not too long ago. And Joel not only contributed first to Strawberry Fields, but then to Good Day Sunshine. But he's the one who put together an entire issue on Paul, the Paul is Dead, Death Rumors, and Death Clues, which was the Bible forever for all the clues, and it was the basis of his own presentation. And Joel was such a great fanzine guy, and such a perfect editor, and someone who contributed all the time. And the losing people like him, and the people who we've lost through the years, just makes the whole it's bittersweet in so many ways.
Yeah.
In any event, thank you both, Al and Charles. Thank you, guys. immensely for being here and talking about this. This has been great. This has really been fun. This has really been fun. And Al, you are welcome back here anytime, sir. So
I'll come crawling back when.
But no, this was a blast.
On occasion.
This was a blast to have
you guys. You guys know that I'm listening every week.
Oh yes, we've heard. We've heard. But again,
Ken, can you believe Charles went through a whole show without plugging his Beatle tours to Liverpool or any of my events?
Yeah, when do they happen, Charles?
Yeah, when?
They happen to happen every August, and we've been doing them since 1983. So if anyone wants to come on the Ultimate Beatles tour to London or Liverpool, just visit liverpooltours.com. And we're also doing a Beatles festival, a music festival. It's called the Fab Four Music Festival in Connecticut, June 9th. So plenty of time for that. But
and I think I'm one of the MCs.
Yeah, but we don't want to plug anything, so I appreciate.
Just make sure you don't plug the trip to Las Vegas to see Love in February.
Exactly. We'll save that for next year.
Okay.
Let me first turn it to Charles and Al, where people can get a hold of both of you. Charles, you first. Where can people get a hold of you?
Liverpool Tours at AOL.com, and the website is liverpooltours.com. And they could call me 203-795-4737 anytime, day or night.
Do you answer the phone?
Sure, of course.
Oh, okay. You get to talk to Charles in person. How about that?
And he's up at all hours of the night too.
Yes, yeah. Call him in the middle of the night. I'm sure he'll love that. Al, where can people get a hold of you?
The easiest is Facebook, Al Sussman, Twitter at ASUSS49, or through Beatle Fan magazine, www.beatlefan.com, Changing Times, 101 Days That Shaped a Generation is still out there.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Thank you. Okay, and let's go start with Ken. Ken, where can people get a hold of you?
You can email me at everylittlething@att.net. My website's kenmichaelsradio.com. I should mention that in addition to my weekly Beatles trivia, which starts every Monday and goes through Sunday, I do have a special contest right now for a non-Beatle prize, which happens once in a while. And that's a DVD of a concert that the Bee Gees gave in Melbourne, Australia in 1989. It's a brand new release. It's coming out February the 2nd. It's called the Bee Gees One for All Tour. If you want to win that, just go to my website, and all the details will be there at kenmichaelsradio.com. There you go.
Thank you. Alan, where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way to get me is through Facebook at either Alan Kozin or Alan Kozin Remixed, and we all read the emails that you send to the show address, which is thingswesaittodayRadioshow@gmail.com.
And you can get a hold of me at BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com. I have a personal Facebook page that is music, a bunch, and other things. But I have a Beatle page called Beatle News and Information. The show has a Facebook page called Things We Said Today Beatles Radio Fans. There's also a second Things We Said Today page for the Fab 4 radio broadcast. And you can download the show on BeatlesExaminer.podbean.com. It's on iTunes. It's on YouTube. It's on TuneIn Radio. It's everywhere you want to be. So it's all over the place. And anywhere, it seems like anywhere you can pick up podcasts, we are listed. So we hope you will listen to the past shows and the current ones. That's about all we have time for today. Thanks to Charles Rosenay and Al Sussman. On behalf of Ken Michaels and Alan Kozin, this is Steve Marinucci saying thank you for listening, and tune in to us next time.